Hi there, everyone, and welcome to Building Blocks, where we get to talk to the best and the brightest about how they got to where they got to and what techniques they use to become an expert in their field. Normally, it's in marketing, but this time it's a little different. My neurosurgeon, someone who operated and touched my brain, Dr. Theodore Schwartz, wrote this book. And ordinarily, we would talk to marketers, but I couldn't help myself. After I had my last brain surgery, yes, I'm fine, he mentioned to me that he was writing a book, and I was just desperate to speak to him and then optimally have some of that information influence the world of marketing. So I hope you enjoy this terrific conversation with Dr. Theodore Schwartz. Dr. Schwartz, I am so excited. I actually have to calm myself down because I'm actually thrilled to talk to you today. First of all, that I'm alive at all is a good thing because you, in fact, did touch my brain. So that's a strange thing that most people don't get to have the benefit of having.
I am thrilled to be here. And it's a strange reversal, right? Because most of the time I see you, you're in my office.
Yes.
You're in my space.
Yes.
You know, and now I'm in your space.
Yes.
I'm in your office.
Yes, you are. That's true. You are in my office and we're having this conversation. And I have written these questions because you wrote this amazing book. In full disclosure, I had a conversation with Dr. Schwartz. I was having a setup for my most recent brain surgery, and you mentioned in passing that you were writing a book, and I was like, I would like to read said book. Should I live? And I lived. So I said I had to deliver on the promise.
Well, that's why I kept you alive, honestly.
Yeah, good reason.
That was my motivation.
That's a good reason. So I read this book, which we have featured here, Gray Matter. The book itself was brilliant how it was crafted. And I have to be honest, I was half expecting it to be just sort of like more of an academic review of the history of brain surgery and neurosurgery and how it was, I was prepared for a snoozer.
Right.
Forgive me. It was not.
I really didn't want it to be that way. I mean, the goal of this book was to tell a story and to take a reader and bring you into my world in a fun, engaging way, so that you wouldn't be intimidated by brain surgery, and to make a topic like brain surgery totally acceptable, understandable, emotional, and I hope I succeeded.
You really did. I have to ask you, though, because it got me in the first minutes of reading this amazing prologue about doing a surgery crazy enough through the eyelid, which I have to admit made me cringe just to consider, like the moment of that. But the best part of the story was how you end the story, which is this relationship that you had with the wife of the patient, who you get that magical hug at the end where you're like, I completed this massive thing. What is it like to do that level of deliverable and then have an emotional end? It's like a movie every day.
So I consider myself incredibly lucky that I get to do what I do. And I really wanted to start the book off with the concept of why we do what we do, which is really the most important thing. And it's the human connection. It's the fact that when I go into this operating room, and I'm doing this technically difficult operation, and there is all of that, but you can't disconnect it from the fact that there's a human being there and that there's a family and a huge network of human beings that are all depending on the result of what I'm doing that day. And I when I'm in there, I don't really think about that, honestly. To me, it's just a task that I'm trying to complete. It's like working on a model ship, whatever you're focusing on. But when you come out and you meet the family, and you sort of say to them, oh, this is what we did. And to you, it's sort of a matter of fact. And you just see on their faces this emotional impact of what you did. And I can't tell you how many times a week they literally will just start crying, hold out their arms and say, can I hug you? And just grab you and squeeze you. And you're like, whoa, it's like this realization. And I love it when I have students with me who get to see that. And sometimes I'll say, hey, come into the waiting room. I want to show you something. And it's amazing how many times it happens. And I'm like, did you see that? Like, that's what this is all about.
You've talked about, I now know some of these doctors' names. Cushing, obviously, was sort of the originator, inventor of neurosurgery, sort of the pioneer. And I feel like, given that I've known you for long enough, to two different brain surgeries, I've seen you present cases, and you're famous, brain surgeon. To write a book as a statement, as the thing that a critical thing you're leaving as a statement piece. I'm sure you've done other advancements in neurosurgery, but this is This is a way to, interestingly enough, to connect with non-neurosurgeons, to connect neurosurgery to regular humans like me. Was that your goal of writing the book?
To some extent, yes. Look, I realized very clearly that people have no clue what brain surgeons really do. And I wanted to create a body of work so someone could pick it up and really understand what it is that we do, how incredible a job it is, how we impact society, culture. Also, what is it like, when your parent gets sick, when your mother gets sick, when your father gets sick, and you know exactly what's going on? Or what is it like when I'm talking to a patient who I know has a malignant brain tumor and I'm telling them that, and I'm seeing them for the first time, and I know exactly what they have and they have no clue. And you know that this is what their future is, but they don't know what their future is at that moment in time. And those types of experiences are very unique, and I wanted to try to encapsulate that so that anyone can have that experience and appreciate it.
I've met, in my travels, many people who've been involved in brain/neurosurgeon and neurologists. There's a certain archetype, if you will, of those people. They're precision-led. There's an accuracy about how they communicate. There isn't a whole lot of humor. One of my old neurologists, I every time I would go in with a joke to see if I could get him to lighten up, because there was just zero.
Nothing.
I mean, I'm not that funny, but I'm not unfunny. So, I mean, I figure one time out for 20 years, nothing, zero. So I am curious how you feel you sit in the land of neurosurgeons. Are you different than other neurosurgeons, or are you similar, a very similar type?
There's a whole chapter in the book where I talk about why people go into neurosurgery and different archetypes within that. And there are a lot of different types. But when you're talking to someone about their health, right, you want to be serious at first. And I take my cue from the patient. And if the patient comes to me and they're being very serious, I am serious. Right. Every once in a while, you'll start out serious and you can see that the patient wants to lighten it up. And so I'll lighten it up a little bit because they sort of open the door and say that it's okay. But you don't want to be joking about something serious when the patient wants to be serious about it. That doesn't go over very well.
No, it doesn't. As a matter of fact, I remember in the preparation for my last brain surgery, which I'm totally fine, and he did a good job, so please, thumbs up. But I mentioned I'd like to make sure that I, love my wife, because my wife was there at the time. And then you quipped back, is there anything that you want to add? And Jen, my wife, quickly responded with, yes, could you remember put in there to do the recycling?
Yeah, exactly.
But it created such a moment of, we were so stressed out, and then it was a moment of, relaxed, like, oh, we can laugh about this.
Right. And by the way, part of that is important that you picked up on that, because I also want to convey that this is not the most serious, grave thing in the world. Like, I want you to come into the OR knowing that you're going to be okay. Like, that's the bottom line. Like, if I look tense, then that's not a good sign. If your surgeon is nervous, it's like, oh, I've never done this before. Like, you don't want to hear that. So you have to convey a sense of confidence that you're going to be fine. I know what I'm doing. I can even joke about it a little bit because it's going to go great. And I do try to convey that to my patients to put them at ease, which I think is very important.
You talked in the book about a number of mistakes that have stuck with you. And as in the marketing world, just to compare, you never forget the big mistakes, like when you send something out to hundreds of millions of people or tens of millions of people and it's wrong. That sticks with you, and it has nothing to do with life and death, obviously. But the mistakes that you wrote on the book, or the errors that were minor that end up having a massive impact. How do you get beyond it? How do you get back on the horse, if you will?
That is one of the biggest challenges of brain surgery, and they do not train you for that.
There's
in
no
medical school,
hey, by the way, if you mess up, here's a class on messing up 101.
Because if you could imagine, you go into medicine because you want to help people, right? You really do. That's your first priority. And you go into neurosurgery because you really want to help someone in a big way. And you help 99.5% of the people that you take care of, which is what makes it so great. But every once in a while, you can hurt somebody because this is very complex surgery. It's very high-risk surgery. Even if you're really good at it, every neurosurgeon is going to have complications. And they weigh on you so deeply, particularly because all you want to do is help people, and here you've done the opposite. And rationally that, there was a good reason you did the operation. You did it as well as you could. Right. You tried your hardest, and all the other people you helped. But but that doesn't help the emotion and the weight of the pain of it. But you have to compartmentalize, and that's what we do. You sort of take it and you have to put it aside for a moment, because you could be operating on someone else in an hour and have to go right back into that operating room and suddenly focus and do your best. And then you come back and obviously deal with it. And the job requires an enormous amount of humility, just like it requires confidence. You have to realize every time you go in the operating room and every time someone puts their life in your hands, that you have to take that responsibility seriously and be very humble about it. And if, God forbid, something goes wrong, you better learn from it and never do it again, because you owe it to that person, that you can then help so many other people with what you gained from that.
And as people are coming to you with their wild array of problems, are you selling yourself or are you selling your expertise?
So this is a marketing venue. So there is a little marketing that has to happen. And in particular, by the way, Manhattan is a very unique environment.
And for brain
surgeons. And we talk about this with our colleagues, because if you're a brain surgeon in Kentucky, you're the only show in town, right? So they come into your office and you say, this is what I'm going to do. And they say, great. And they sign on the dotted line. Right. I'll see a patient and they'll say, great to meet you. When I started out, they would say, so nice to meet you. We're just going to get a second opinion here. We're going to get a third opinion here, a fourth opinion here. And they can literally do them all in one day, right? Because it's a cab ride. They can go to 4 different major medical centers and see great surgeons. So there is a lot of marketing that goes on. I like to do positive marketing and not negative, right? So I will never say anything negative about someone else. Most of these people are my friends. And it turns out most of them are really good surgeons, right? So there's not much negative to say.
Right.
But I'll just say, look, this is who I am. This is what I do.
Right.
I've been doing it for this long. This is my expertise. So yes, there is some marketing, but I think keep it positive.
So I would have switched to this amazing book. How long did it take you to write it, by the way?
1 year.
In the process of marketing a product, did you feel in some way how do I even talk to a book publisher about this? How did you pitch it?
So I had no intention of writing a book that was going to sell and market. I didn't know anything about it. I just wanted to tell a story, and I really like writing. So I wrote it. It was a passion project. Well, so I sent it to some friends of mine who were writers, first of all, just to say, hey, I wrote this book. You're a writer. What do you think? And they basically said, look, this is pretty good. You have something here, but you can't sell this. This is not the way it works. And I was like, really? He goes, yeah. First of all, you need an agent. And then the agent sells it to a publishing company. I had no idea that that's how it worked. I thought I just write a book and was like, here's my book. Yay, great, thank you. So I had to find an agent, and I had to send emails to agents, and I got a bunch of no's, which was fine because, that's the real reality. And then I got a yes. You only need one yes. And then she said you should work with an editor, which was great to work with someone else who's a writer, because then I learned, right? Because they take what you wrote and they say, look, this is great, but what if you did this? If we shaped it this way? I'm like, oh, that's great. What a great idea.
So I've been reading, follow you actively. I did not know, although it's totally logical to me, that you had to make a choice between being a musician and, I guess, medicine.
I was very serious about it, and I came to a crossroads where I had to make a decision. And ultimately, what made the decision for me were 2 things. One, I felt that music for me was very egocentric in a way. I know you're giving to people, you're creating music, but I loved being on stage and performing. And I wanted to do a career where I felt like I was giving more to the rest of the world. The second thing was I was a bass player, and most bass players end up backing up other people, to be honest. There are very few lead bass players. And so I
Jaco Pastorius.
Yes, my favorite. You know who Jaco is?
Of course. Who doesn't know Jaco? My dad was a bass player, so...
Right, so Jaco's my hero. I learned how to play everything that Jaco ever played. I'm getting chills right now, Josh, that you know who Jaco Pastorius is. Unless you're Jaco, you end up backing people up, and you often might end up in a wedding band, in fact, unless you're very successful. So I just thought I was going to do medicine and wouldn't take all the risk of bass playing as a career.
I'm going to play a game with you. You can see I've marked a number of things that I
love it.
I'm going to go through the book, and we're going to pick one. The question that I have is, and it's in your chapter 14 on what's it like to be a brain. And I was a philosophy studier. I loved philosophy, still do. And you pose this question about whether free will exists. And I was remarkably taken with your response because you had a scientific evidence to suggest one way or the other. So please, does free will exist?
No.
Well, that's a fast response.
I didn't give that response. There's a famous expression, I think Martin Buber said it, which is that I have to believe in free will. I have no choice.
Right.
Which I love. So what I tried to do in this book was really bring in the evidence we have from the operating room. So the evidence that neurosurgeons or neurosurgery operations have provided the philosophical community about whether free will exists. So one is these classic split brain experiments. We can split the corpus callosum, which is what connects the left brain with the right brain.
Right.
So that you have two independent brains inside your skull. And it is possible to put information into one hemisphere of the brain that the other hemisphere of the brain is not aware of. And your language abilities only exist on one side, not the other side. And the bottom line is you can put information into the part of the brain that does not have language, which controls the left hand in most people. And the left hand can behave in a certain way.
Right.
Or you can create an emotion in that hemisphere, and the person can behave as if they have that emotion. And the left side of the brain that is not aware of the information that went in there will experience their body doing something or their body feeling something.
Right.
And if you ask them
getting
why,
excited, getting upset or excited
angry or scared, and you'll look scared, and they'll say, "Why are you scared at the moment?" And you'll make something up. You'll basically make up a story as to why you're scared. You'll say, "Well, the jacket you're wearing, I find very intimidating," or what you said to me.
They create it.
They create a story. And that, we think, is how most of human experience is, that the brain is processing information and causing the body to do things. And another module in the brain, a part of the brain, is sort of experiencing these things and making up a story, a reason why all of these things happened. The other experiments that were done are involve putting an electrode in the brain and recording neurons that are actually processing information and the neurons that are creating behaviors, and show that those neurons are active, meaning they're firing, a good second before the person even has made the decision to do what they're going to do or to say what they're going to say.
Snap my fingers right now, I have that information to do that motion happen a second before.
There are neurons in your brain that made that decision a second before you even decided to do it. Not just a second before you snapped your finger, but you decided to do it a little before that. And before that decision was even made conscious to you, there were neurons saying, okay, he's going to snap his finger in about a second.
So, okay, see that little inner voice? Okay, he's going to do this thing. Who then writes the script? Where's the impetus for the
So it's all in the brain, right? That's all there is your brain. And your brain is processing information, and it's creating ideas and thoughts, and it's predicting possible futures and deciding what you want to do in order to behave a particular way. And all of that is happening unconsciously that you're not aware of. And you're experiencing it, and that sort of creates the illusion that there's a self in there making decisions. But as far as science tells us, there is no self in there making those decisions. The brain is just making things happen, and you're experiencing them happen, and you're along for the ride.
Man, that's a crazy chapter.
Now, what we don't know is sort of this concept of why is it that you experience something? Like, that's what we don't really understand. Why is it that there is something that it is like to be you experiencing those things that no one knows?
I have a couple questions that I have that are out here in the land of marketing, world that are just, I have to ask, because the world of AI is expanding, and you do touch on brain-computer interface at the end of the book, and I think it's fascinating to think about how the leap should be able to be made, right? If my hand can control a mouse to control a computer, or fingertips to keyboard, it's probably not that far to be able to control, have a brain just control the interface to control the computer, and then leap optimally from a brain just sort of controlling a computer without needing an interface.
We can do that right now.
So that's happening now.
Yes. Because first of all, there are patients who have ALS or who have had strokes, who are in wheelchairs, who literally can't move their bodies,
right?
But their brains are perfectly intact. And there's no reason we shouldn't be taking the information out of their brains and allowing them to surf the internet and to work on a computer, or even control a robotic arm or robotic legs to move themselves around.
Are you worried? A lot of marketers are concerned about the computer / artificial intelligence taking away the creative part of our work.
Yeah.
Do you think that are we being dramatic, or is it a good thing to be worried about? how do you feel about this world of AI?
Yeah. There are certain aspects of what I do that probably could be done very well by an AI. Like if I look at an MRI scan and I say, I think it's this kind of tumor. Well, that kind of sifting through information, an AI would be really good at that, right? Because you can feed it a million scans and tell it this is what the tumor is, and then they're like, we got it. But when you're operating and you're interacting with a physical environment and you're making 1,000 decisions, and like I said before, as if you were on the table as a human being, which the AI will never be able to really figure out, AIs and robots are less good at interacting with the physical world because they didn't evolve having to deal with the physical world. They evolved sitting on a shelf in a box, right? They didn't have to find food to survive and to evade predators and deal with all the things in the world that our species evolved to do really, really well. And our brains evolved to do that kind of stuff. So I think it's going to be a long time before an AI, if ever, can act at the level that we do interacting with our environment, because they're never going to evolve like we evolved interacting with the world around us.
I so enjoyed this book. I enjoyed this conversation. Every time I talk to you, I always feel like a sense of tremendous joy that someone who loves what you do as much as you do is so good at a virtuoso, if you will, the Jaco Pastorius of brain surgeons. I am so deeply appreciative for you to come and have a conversation about it and help us sort of, as marketers, start to appreciate how we can potentially apply what you have in this book, the excellence that you've driven and discussed, and apply it to our lives. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.